Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you. We're going to start with a couple of announcements. First announcement is from HVZ, and I've been told to warn you that if you're easily motion sick, that maybe this isn't the announcement for you. We just say don't puke on my seat.
Okay.
Students, faculty, and staff of Bethel College, I come before you today to report a devastating tragedy.
Where am I? My name is Andrew Avey, and I'm a freshman at Bethel College. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am.
Last night, Delta Flight 0606, carrying the members of the HVC Club, who were flying back from South America, flew into a thunderstorm and disappeared from FAA radar in the early hours of the evening.
Oh God, okay, what was that? Oh no, oh no.
They did not arrive in Wichita this morning as planned, and the plane is presumed crashed in the Caribbean Sea, likely close to Bermuda.
Oh no! 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 No!
Attempts to use radio or GPS to locate them have failed. All of the next of kin have been notified, and crews and passengers of the plane have been declared missing.
What are they? This came out of nowhere. Oh no! No! Thought I lost you!
We do not know if they are dead or alive. The United States and the Bermudan government are cooperating to search the area they were last known to be. But as I glance at this computer, no sign of them has been found at this time. It's not just the rest of the club that is affected, but all of us in the Bethel community, as well as the far-flung families and friends of those on the plane scattered throughout the nation and the world. Cities in Kansas like Topeka, Lawrence, Kansas City, Wichita, Whitewater, Newton, and most of all, our own hometown of North Newton have been affected. Also, states like California and places as far-flung as Wuppertal, Germany, carry on part of the burden of listening and watching the news. We are one community, and as such, our hearts beat as one as we await the word from the Coast Guard or volunteers flying out in attempts to find them.
No! No!
I ask now for a period of silence to reflect on the great and lasting impact that these individuals and this group has had on our campus.
What? Okay. Next announcement is from Michael Harrell.
Okay, so last month, a student, Harry, got his laptop stolen. And I felt really, really bad for this guy. I didn't even know him, but I felt like something had to be done. So I prayed on it, talked to my CIC, and I came up with this idea to have a surprise fundraiser for him. So I went around to each room on the campus, asking people if they'd be willing to donate $3 or whatever they had if they wanted to contribute to Carter's laptop. I think that's him over there. Really bad. I have really bad eyesight. But and I raised $800 in pledges. I only have 400 collected. I still have to collect from other people. But do you want to come get it? Because it's for you. My bad, dude. There's more money coming. I still have to go collect and stuff. But I think I said this, $830 in pledges. And faculty, students all contribute to this. Like, this is all you guys and had nothing to do with me. So thank you for being so supportive about this. That's all I have to say.
That is awesome, guys. Thank you. And thank you, Michael. Last but not least, some sad news. Professor Emeritus of Music, J. Harold Moyer, passed away last night. Harold was a key component in building the Bethel College music program into what it is today. His parents, he comes from a storied sort of Bethel family. Both of his parents were professors here, were faculty here. So remember Harold's family as you go through your day-to-day. Today is the last of the, is it the last of the Menno? No, the continuation, I'm sorry, of the Menno Simons Lecture series. And to present today's speaker, I invite to the podium Dale Schrag.
In 1971, John Waltner was teaching American history at Bethel College while Dr. James Yonke was on leave in Botswana. John chose to attend the annual meeting of the American Historical Association that year and found himself at a meal sitting next to the chairman of the Department of History at the University of Illinois. Curious, he asked the gentleman if he happened to remember a doctoral student by the name of Keith Sprunger. The department chair responded with both enthusiasm and disappointment. "Of course I remember Keith Sprunger," he said. "When we granted him the PhD degree, we had very, very high hopes. We thought Keith Sprunger was among the finest students we'd ever educated at Illinois. But I'm afraid he's proven to be something of a disappointment. Last I heard, he was still teaching at some small church-related college in Nebraska or Kansas." Indeed, he was. And your alleged loss, Mr. No-Name Department Chair, proved to be Bethel College's immeasurable gain. Keith L. Sprunger came to Bethel College with his newly minted PhD from the University of Illinois in 1963. And from the very outset, Bethel students and faculty and administration knew that they had something very special. Excuse me. I know I knew that. I came to Bethel College in the fall of 1965 and enrolled, as did most all freshmen, in the history of Western civilization, taught by Keith Sprunger in what is now the projection room of the Mennonite Library and Archives. It was an amazing course. I had decided as a fifth grader that I was going to earn a PhD in history and teach in some college somewhere. How fleeting those childhood dreams. But by the time I came to Bethel, I knew that one doesn't just major in history in graduate school. One needs to specialize. I remember in that fall of 1965 thinking, wow, this ancient history is really fascinating. I think I'll major in the study of Greece and Rome. But then Dr. Sprunger would move on to the Middle Ages, and I'd think, no, maybe I should major in medieval history. And so it went. Every historical period that Keith Sprunger introduced us to seemed more fascinating and interesting than the one before. Even more important, that course in the history of Western civilization served as a kind of foundation that gave additional meaning and understanding to every subsequent liberal arts course I ever took at Bethel or anywhere else. Indeed, I owe Keith Sprunger a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid. I will always be in his debt. Keith L. Sprunger graduated from Wheaton College in 1957 with a degree in history and a minor in biology. After brief experimentation with teaching high school social studies, he entered the University of Illinois, where he earned his master's and PhD degrees in modern European history. He taught with distinction at Bethel College from 1963 to 2001, earning along the way the E. Harris Harbison Award for Gifted Teaching, a national award for outstanding teaching. He has written 8 books, the most recent of which is Bethel College of Kansas, 1887 to 2012, the basis of these 60th annual Menno Simons Lectures. Keith, it is with deep gratitude and eager anticipation that we look forward to hearing your thoughts on listening to students' voices, postcards, t-shirts, and underground opinions. Please help me welcome Dr. Keith L. Sprunger.
Well, the irrepressible Dale Schrag has done it again with one of his famous introductions. And Dale, I remember one thing about history. You did have the spirit of history from early times, and you once expressed a desire to invent a time machine that would take you back to these periods so that you could relive them again. And the last I heard, he still hasn't gotten it, but perhaps he's still working on it. Well, my last and most thorough project of recent years has been working on the history of new history of Bethel College, starting from 1887 and coming up to the present time. And for this study, I wanted to delve into, discover some things about what students were doing and thinking when they weren't in the classroom. I looked for some windows into student life and thought. Today there are such things as student satisfaction surveys and the like, which tell you a great many things, but that sort of thing was not always available. College catalogs and official publications give you the faculty view of things, how the college wants to present itself on the outside. For the student views, I thought I needed to look elsewhere, to the students themselves or to student-produced materials. And that would include things like yearbooks, which are generated out of student ideas. Here's what some students were saying 100 years ago. In this particular one, here we see faculty and students knocking heads. That was a view from 1913, like a couple of billy goats. Let's try another one. 1911 yearbook. The idea that students felt that they were just having stuff poured into them. Can you see those funnels into empty heads? And all those bottles of materials that were pouring in, Latin and biology and history and so on. If we come closer to the present, but maybe more to the generation of your parents, I thought I came across something from 1984, sort of the top 10 things that students were saying. Now, these first ones showed what students were thinking about professors. What were students saying about other students? And here was a kind of top 10 list of what students were saying about what they liked and disliked, and mostly dislikes. Top 10. I just hate it when guys wear a suit and no tie. It just drives me up a wall. Freshman student from Montezuma, a girl. Tennis shoes and dress pants, what a kill. Sophomore from Wichita, a girl. When guys wear dark suits, dark shoes, and white socks, no good. Girl. Women who have so many clothes, they can't possibly wear them all, but still need more. A boy. Women with too much hairspray. A boy. When people brush their teeth in the water fountain. That was in 1984. I suppose we've moved beyond that now. When people don't flush the toilet. One thing that bothers me, here's another one thing that bothers me are people who talk during convo and concerts. A girl who is currently on the faculty, and I think she's still against people who talk in convo and concerts. From a boy. When girls you're dancing with wave to everybody else. Freshman from Hutchinson. Women who talk to you one day, then purposely avoid you the next day, and then repeat this vicious cycle. A boy. And my last one from a girl. When guys take you out, make out with you, and never talk to you again. But that, of course, is all history. Well, that was sort of a top 10. That's really not a scientific study. That's just what everybody was saying. I'm concentrating today on 3 other areas. Postcards, T-shirts, and underground newspapers. Now, postcards are an interest of mine. I collect postcards. I have about 200 or more Bethel College postcards. Some of them go quite far back, as for example this one from 1915. If you go back 100 years, we are in the golden age of postcards. Today, I suppose you don't send or receive a lot of postcards. But 100 years ago, students made lots of use of postcards to communicate and express opinions. Postcards served as the common means of quick communication. Post office service at that time was frequent and inexpensive. The postman made frequent stops, sometimes 2 and 3 deliveries a day. Stamps were cheap. So cheap and dependable was it that, let's say, this afternoon, you would send a postcard up to, let's say, McPherson saying, I'll be on the train at 9 o'clock in the morning, meet me at the station. And you would expect the postcard to have arrived and someone to be there to meet you. I wouldn't attempt that today. One disadvantage, of course, of postcards was that information there was not very confidential. You know, very public. I always figured that our postman back in my hometown read the postcards as he moved through the route. Now, in those days, 100 years ago, you could make your own postcards, and students were really into cameras. Kodaking is very clearly the rage. This is a report of the Bethel Breeze. Now, that was the name of the student newspaper back in 1918. It was only 1921 that the student newspaper changed the name to the Collegian. For those first years, it was called the Breeze, the Bethel Breeze, but the faculty objected to it because they thought it sounded rather frivolous and like a lot of hot air blowing around, and persuaded the students to change this more dignified name, the Collegian. But according to the Breeze, every student, if he wants to be up to date and in fashion, needs to have a Kodak camera. And if you took pictures with your Kodak camera, that was called Kodaking, going around and Kodaking. This was a favorite way of recording the highlights of college life. And a good many of the college photos ended up as postcards because when you would take photos, you could have them printed on special photo paper. You would have the picture on one side, but they already pre-printed on the other side with the postcard format, this place for address, this place for message. And by using this method, you could produce your own postcard. You'd take a roll of film. Do you know what I'm talking about, roll of film? That sounds probably sort of like something dinosaurs used to use. You would take your roll of film down to the studio, and they would print it off on the special paper, and then you would get it back, and you would have a postcard that you could send out to your friends. As, for example, this was one of those postcards. Someone had taken a picture of our esteemed administration building with the flag flying. This is 1915. We used to have the flagpole on top of the building. Those were very patriotic days. And the flagpole was moved down to its present location in 1928. But that was quite a statement. And along the side, someone is giving the message. It's written there, how soon will we see this dear old place again? Must have been a graduate who has left it and saying, "When will I see Bethel again?" Here are some more examples of some of these homemade postcards. Now, if you just printed one, then they're very rare. Sometimes you'd print several so you could send it out to all your friends. And by the way, these are called real photo postcards. These are particularly popular with collectors because they're often quite rare. Sometimes only one of a kind, sometimes several. This postcard gives us a little view of proper student dress while they're having this watermelon party. 1913 on this one. By the way, this was expected. You'd always wear white shirt, tie, and suit to class. That showed that you were a student, not just some country bumpkin. Thank you, Dale Schock, for carrying on that tradition. He learned that from his history classes. This one is called Joyriding, and it showed all the cars that were on campus back in 1913, all three of them. And this was a little bit of a risque photo because that skirt is riding up slightly high, showing a little bit of leg. Here are the girls at the girls' dormitory, and it's called In Battle Array. That was written on the back, In Battle Array. They're defending the dormitory with their mops and brooms. Now, if you turn over to the other side of these cards, you often find a lot of very interesting information. So you want to look both the front and the back. The front will show you things about buildings, the kind of dress the people were using, transportation, just what were popular topics. But on the back, you get those little messages like, when will we see dear old Bethel again? Or here are a couple other examples from some of my cards. The back side, I'm in Newton in the hospital. Mr. Rempel, my roommate, he's okay, 1910. Latin quiz was hard. Asked professor whether I killed him again. He said, I happened to pass, 1911. Don't you think we were the candy kids at Bethel this year? I think so, 1911. Yes, you may go skating if you be sure to be back on time. Look under the stamp for a secret message. That's how you could keep the postman from... You could add a little bit underneath there, like love and kisses or something. Or one I have that shows the administration building. This building is where I'm supposed to be spending my time. Sure is a magnificent structure, is it not? Here's one that would be very typical of our area. Hot, hot, here in Kansas, July 9, 1920. School's grand, but keeps me so busy I don't have much time for fun, 1947. Well, such messages as these, always visible to the curious eyes of every postal employee, caught the flow of ordinary life. Reading the postcard messages gives a grassroots view of ordinary history. Like too many studies, not enough fun, and so on. Although a short message was the rule, it was possible to cram a great deal into the little space. If you wrote small, you could get quite a bit there. The Bethel postcard writers, however, were mere amateurs in this regard compared to the experts of tiny writing. Miss Rita Kittredge of Belfast, Missouri, was the world champion postcard writer. One of her cards contained 15,000 words. I've had some exam papers that seem to have been written in about that kind of script. Next, I was going to comment about another way that we learn some things about student opinions. We'll just leave the women up here defending us for a while. When I bring up the topic of T-shirts. Now, a shirt used to be just something to keep out the sun or the cold, but in more recent years, it has become a billboard to advertise a message. What you want to, how you want to project yourself. I also have a very modest T-shirt collection, and I brought a few samples of them along here, and I'll just sort of demonstrate them. I thought of putting on a style show, but I wasn't sure who had the qualities to wear these particular t-shirts. This one here is probably the oldest one in my collection. This is a Conrad Snyder. Now, if you go into our new academic center, there's that fantastic mural that you meet there. You know, that's Conrad Snyder. This was his work as a 10-year-old. We can see that his talent was, his love of Bethel College was very strong. And he turned out a t-shirt doing it all by hand. Consequently, it's a very limited supply that he was able to produce using acrylics. He produced this one, and I'd say at the most he did maybe 10 of these. And so here's an example of a message. My young son Philip used to wear this one, and we have preserved it as an artifact. But all sorts of things you can do with t-shirts. You might decide to buy one and just simply advertise the maroon and gray, Bethel College. You might decide to show Mennonite colors, as in this Menno Power t-shirt of the 70s. This was the era of black power and student power, and some students said, what about Menno Power? Okay, that's advertising. This is something that came out of our history club, a Machiavelli t-shirt. Someone must have been in a rather grouchy mood that day. Machiavelli. Student designed postcard from Amnesty International. Amnesty International people, do you remember this this Hope t-shirt? Bethel Centennial t-shirt, 1887, 1987. Now we're at 125. These last two come from the Bethel College Motorcycle Club. Is that still roaring around campus? Now this one and the other one, which is a different version, kind of unique because it shows Menno Simons riding a motorcycle. That's what we call Bethel ingenuity. This one from that same tradition. Now, I haven't yet written my book on Bethel College t-shirts, but I'm just alerting to the fact that I think this could be a significant topic. Let's move on to a third area, and that would be underground or alternative newspapers. Now, I found a lot of great material in the Collegian, and my tribute to all the people who put the Collegian out. It's been going since 1917, 1918, either as the Breeze or the Collegian. But there always have been faculty sponsors who keep an eye on things, and so you don't necessarily get everything that students are thinking. You get that which is considered proper and respectable. If you had improper and unrespectable thoughts, you put out your own secret newspaper, which we call an underground newspaper. And this was a venue for opinions more on the edge, the kind that you might not want to put your name to, or you might not want to wear on a t-shirt. Alternative views, printed anonymously. It would then be distributed around campus pretty much hand to hand or slipped under doors. I remember arriving on campus at different times, finding one of these under the door, and you quickly looked at it to see if you had been, as a faculty member, slammed by name or only by implication. And then you wondered which of your students might have put out this trash opinion. Bethel has a long tradition of student nonconformity, and the underground news sheet was one way to get at these alternative views, going back probably even into the 1940s. But if we come into the 60s, there were at least two that appeared there, a rather mild one called the Thrasher, and a more sharp-edged one called the Fly. Has a kind of an Art Nouveau design to it, but the message was quite sharp. This example of an alternative, not legally sponsored or not officially sponsored news sheet came out over a period of 2 years, rather infrequently, but irregularly, but always anticipated, between 1968 and 1970. It grew out of student ferment of the 1960s and the anti-Vietnam protests. The FLY group was composed of, I suppose, rather alienated students not happy with the way Bethel and the country as a whole was being run. One of the leaders of this movement and paper editor said we were not just local complainers, but we were in tune with national moves and concerns. We were involved with the struggle against the Vietnam War, the struggle against the draft. We were in favor of black power, student power, civil rights, and the struggle for student rights at Bethel. The FLY rallied against national oppression, which they assumed to be, or which was centered in the administration of President Nixon in Washington, D.C., and against local oppression, which was thought to be residing primarily in the Bethel president and the dean of students. These people were a minority of the student body, but well organized and vocal. Some of the staff of the FLY wrote under their own names. Others preferred to be anonymous. So you don't always know who is saying what. They had their own printing machine, a spare duplicator, which was hidden in a closet at Gehring Hall, which was the boys' dorm. And they would turn out a couple hundred copies every now and then. Why the name The Fly? Well, the fly is annoying and mischievous and irritating. And it is the voice of the dissenter, and they took comfort in the fact that they could go back to Socrates, the gadfly. They were the gadflies of Bethel. Even Menno Simons, leader of the Mennonites, they proposed was really a fly at heart, annoying to the powerful rulers of the time. And the fly succeeded in being very annoying to college authorities who worked for a couple of years to close it down. What kind of articles would an underground newspaper produce, such as The Fly? Well, there would be articles against fascism, against war, against racism, and on campus against such issues as required chapel. At that time, chapel and convocation were all sort of mixed into one. And there was a card that you had to turn in at the door to show that you had attended. They were against required chapel, required attendance cards, against irrelevant courses, against the director of religious life, against the Bethel College Mennonite Church, against the college president. And one particular complaint about the president was the fact that he wore a crew cut. In the era of longer hair and beards, that was considered as pretty much a damning feature. The Fly advised students to resist authority, burn your chapel cards. At other colleges, the students were perhaps burning their draft cards, and some of that did take place here, but you could have a combined burning, draft cards and chapel cards. One particularly annoying story to college officials, although it was quite a scoop, was one that revealed the salaries of the president and his top administrative officers, all of them earning that astounding amount of over $10,000 a year. Watch your step, warned the Fly. These $10,000 men are dangerous. Here's another example. The Rag. Now this was kind of a voice of the 70s, came out in the later 70s by students who had concerns, but they are somewhat different than those of the 60s, which had been more involved with these national issues. The people who put out the Rag were concerned about such issues. Well, they had a kind of wider concern. Bethel, they said, had become a lying, cheating, and stealing institution, and they were against that. And particularly as it was applied in charges in the cafeteria. The cafeteria food charges were too high, And in fundraising, the college quoted scripture in its fundraising letters, which is said to be a kind of hypocrisy if you are a lying, cheating, and stealing institution. For a printing method, they didn't own their own machine. Instead, they typed it all out and then took it downtown into Newton to a local print shop who turned out their first issue. But when they went to pick it up, this printer, who happened to be a Bethel supporter, told them, "I'd appreciate if you take your business somewhere else in the future. I don't care to print this sort of stuff." I don't know where they got their next issue, but at least that ended that particular venue. There was quite a bit of opposition to the president of that time, President Schultz. I believe he was a speaker here in Convocation several weeks ago, telling about all the good times, but I don't recall that he mentioned the rag, which had a few different kind of thoughts. Well, where is the underground newspaper movement today? I haven't seen any of exactly this kind at Bethel for several years. Now, I recently have been in contact with the editor of the rag. He lives out of state now, and I approached him by saying, would you have any comments? Do you happen to know anything about it? I didn't say that I thought he was the editor, but I implied that he might know something. And he told me some things. And then he said, he said, "You're not going to see any more of that kind of thing. The underground newspaper used to be the sign of a campus where the students were lively and informed and energetic. But today, this sort of thing would be pointless. Anybody who has some complaint can post their views on a website or on a Facebook page. But back in 1979, when we were putting out the rag, mass distribution still involved printing, going down to the print shop, paying for it, distributing it, and they only got 2 issues out because then the money and the energy ran out, I suppose. But he said today it's so much different. You go to the internet, but at that time this was the route you had to go if you had really views much more out on the edge. Many of these underground efforts fizzled due to a lack of money, but there have been others. As I said, the rag in the 70s. In the 80s, there was one called The Rock. In the 90s, there was one called Der Pfeffernuss, the Journal of Surreptitious Subversion. And I did find at least one paper edition in the 2000s called The Bethel Collision, on a collision course with authority since 2003. But I think you have to go to the internet to go to the next chapter of this topic. This is one of the cartoons from the rag. Now, some of the underground alternative material is quite personal and unkind, and the language is crude and rude. This cartoon about the cafeteria would be one of those. I chose to omit this from my new history of Bethel College. Was that a mistake? Did I give less than a true picture of Bethel College by eliminating some of these type of things? But let's go to a more positive topic. Back to the postcards. 1913, the road, College Avenue sweeping up to the college with the caption from the 1913 yearbook, "The road that leads to success." I hope that Bethel College proves to be the road to success for each and every one of you. In conclusion, I would like to say that in search of student voices, I had a lot of fun going through old newspapers, postcards, T-shirts, tracking down the people who used to run the underground newspapers who were kind of secret but not totally so. There are a lot of student areas that we could explore further. What suggestions do you have for getting the pulse of student ideas and opinions? And of course, technology and times change. When we put out our next history of Bethel in 25 to 30 years, what sources will they be using to write the history of Bethel students and Bethel history at that point? Thank you very much, fellow students, fellow historians.
That was great. Becca, would you? So actually, I want to put that question to students. Like, where would you find this kind of dissenting underground material? Not because I want to seek it out, though I totally will. Where would you look for that today? Becca, you gotta.
It was student announced once upon a time.
Yes, student announce.
I need to subscribe to that. I only get faculty announced, and that stuff is pretty dull.
Yeah, we're boring. Others? Questions or... Okay, Wes.
Hi, thank you for coming today. Actually, in the past, through Student Senate, we've started like blogs and different things. And actually, last year, the whole issue with Student Announce was sort of a big deal. And we've wanted to sort of create a venue to, for students to use, to sort of voice their concerns and things like that. Have there been popular methods in the past other than, just sort of like underground newspapers and things like that that you saw that were effective in doing this?
Well, something else that used to be very present on campus, but a little hard to track down these days. We used to have a daily announcement sheet that went up on bulletin boards, and every day there was something posted on all the bulletin boards of campus, telling you what's going on and announcements. That served quite a purpose, but the thing is, they tended to be thrown away, and so I didn't really have very good access to that. I think there would have been a lot of that sort of thing in the past if I could have had those day-to-day announcements. It's just that sort of thing that people throw away. And that's what I'm also concerned about in something like Student Announce or some of these internet things, that they're going to be here today and gone tomorrow. Who's going to be saving those so that we can go back through those like I could go back through the paper records or the postcards and so on. So they're new techniques, but they're, the things that were the best, the Mesopotamians had them, those clay tablets. They're still good. And what we're using today is fizzling out. For example, the fly, done on those spirit duplicators in purple ink, those have faded to the point some of them are almost unreadable. If they'd use clay tablets, they'd still be good. Any more
questions?
ideas for me?
Keith, it strikes me that Instagram, seriously, with the Kodaking thing, right?
Yeah.
Instagram seems like almost an update of that, like 100 years hence, sort of that technology coming back around,
Okay.
taking pictures, sending them out, that sort of thing. It all happens electronically, but yeah.
That's true. That's the new version of Kodaking.
Right, exactly.
Good.
Other questions? If not, let's thank Keith again.
Thank you.
There are 2 more lectures, right?
Yes.
One tonight?
Tonight on the 1960s,
Okay.
and then tomorrow night, a panel discussion on writing college histories.
Okay, great. And those are both taking place here?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Events this week. We've got a scrimmage tonight against, help me, Brown Mackey. Is that right? The men's basketball scrimmage tonight against Brown Mackey at 7 p.m. Is that right? Here. And then another scrimmage, men's basketball, first game, actually, men's basketball, women's basketball against Brown Mackey, Central Christian, here. Other events that are happening over the next couple of days before Friday's convo? Soccer? What's happening soccer-wise? Okay. What's senior night on Tuesday night here? Against whom? What time? 5 and 7:30. Great. Yeah, Maggie. Okay, very good. And this is Spirit Week, right? So you guys have gotten that information. Yes, wearing that hat. Yes, very good. Well done. Anything else happening this week? All right, guys, if not, have a good one. You are dismissed.